ICDB Special Kakaaki, the African Voice. My name is Hannah Bashala.
And I am Tehila Zaman. Studies have shown that excessive drinking has the ability to lower inhibitions, impair a person's sense of judgment, and increase the risk of aggressive and risky behaviors. In fact, evidence review found that men's alcohol use tripled their risk of perpetrating gender-based violence or interpersonal violence. Women whose partners were regularly drunk were 6 times more likely to experience gender-based violence, and this is just statistics on alcohol without other substances. On today's ICDB special, we'll be discussing substance abuse and its impact on gender-based violence.
Joining us on the show is Dr. Akani Domo Ibana from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Welcome to the show, sir. To open our discussion, as an expert, what is the relationship between gender-based violence and substance abuse?
Well, when you're talking about gender-based violence, basically any act that is perpetrated against someone that's physical, that's mental, that's economic, that's psychological, that's sexual, and it's perpetrated based on the gender, that's, what falls under that. When you talk of substance abuse itself, you find that those two are twin devils that coexist. There's the issue of whether one leads to this one or this one leads to other. What we found is that the relationship between the two are quite tight. I'll give you an instance. When they asked people that suffered from gender-based violence, the women that suffer from gender-based violence, and they asked how many of them are using drugs, they found out about, if I remember, 20 to 72% said they use drugs. When they reverted and asked, okay, everyone that is using substances, the women, how many of you are suffering from gender-based violence? They found that 31 to 99% of them had experienced gender-based violence. So you find out that anybody that's using substances or that's involved in that culture is more likely to perpetrate or be a victim of gender-based violence. So it's quite high, and the relationship is has shown up in many researches across different cultures.
Thank you, sir. Now, since evidence review has found that men's alcohol use tripled their risk of perpetrating gender-based violence or interpersonal violence, in the Nigerian context, do these statistics hold true?
They do hold true. There were earlier researches, one of which I participated in 2012, actually looking more at the qualitative narrative of why does this happen, because it does happen. And part of the explanation is given, it varies. First of all, sometimes alcohol is used as an excuse for the violence itself. It is the alcohol that made me do it. And it's not just alcohol, other drugs too are involved. So you find out that when people are using it, it's almost like they're saying it's the alcohol that made me do it. If I didn't drink, I wouldn't have done this. If I was more sober, I would have reasoned well. And so, yes, it does have that tendency, and we have found it in Nigeria that holds. A lot of the men that actually exhibit and perpetrate gender-based violence have used alcohol. What they found, not in Nigeria but in other cases, that they're 11 times more likely to have perpetrated gender-based violence after drinking than if they hadn't taken a drink.
Are there any programs or interventions currently ongoing to address gender-based violence and substance abuse, particularly among young people?
It's interesting that you asked that because young people are there's a larger percent of gender-based violence and substance abuse that's caused by or found in the younger population as compared to the aged. So age is a factor in the issue of gender-based violence and substance abuse. In terms of programs that actually address both, the programs currently are not many. What you have is programs of prevention that either address the ones that have to do with violence, and to a large extent in Nigeria, most of these are currently just, criminal based or justice based or human rights based. And then, but they haven't started developing the public health perspective of looking at this as a problem that's a disorder that needs, the help of programs to reorient the person's mind. On the flip side, you do have substance abuse programs. So what that logic is trying to say is that if you have a program that reduces substance abuse, that program would also, by implication, then also reduce gender-based violence. And that holds true most of the time, but not all of the time, because you find out even if we treat somebody that had a drug use problem, we find out that sometimes those people still go on to perpetuate gender-based violence. So the substance abuse treatment alone does not solve the gender-based violence that is perpetuated by this person that was using substances. So there needs to be a program that looks at the two. And what a first stage would be maybe to just, every time anybody presents at a center, is it a hospital or child welfare, we screen for both substance use and for gender-based violence. And that will be a problem. We can at least identify that, look, we have a problem and it's a twin problem. The other thing that we have in the country that we need to look at for solution is programs that are gender sensitive, because many programs we have do not take the peculiarities of the women that are victimized or experiencing this gender into consideration. I'll give you an example. You find out that a woman that is using drugs, right, and is also experiencing violence, finds it very embarrassing and finds it very difficult to report. And even when they report, you find out she finds it difficult to access help, because to access help, she has to get permission from the person that is actually the perpetrator of the violence. So she's in a very difficult situation. And more often, she's already dependent on that person economically. And I don't think the programs that we currently have take all these sensitivities into consideration. So we need to begin to think about how we can cater for women that are actually experiencing both substance use disorder and or gender-based violence. And part of it is just to start that routine screening. And the second part is actually to sit with these women and ask them what services would we need to provide that would help them in terms of addressing these problems that they experience.
Thank you, sir. So please, in few words, can you tell us what interventions are being introduced to raise awareness around substance abuse and its dangers?
Well, there are quite a number of programs that the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime has engaged in. Luckily, we had a large funding that covered us for 10 years, and different programs have been ongoing since then. To raise awareness, there's this programs we call drug prevention, treatment, and care sensitization. It's just a package that trains people to become more knowledgeable of all the issues that surround drug use, to address the stigmas, and to make them such that they will now be in a better position to approve interventions that work. There are many prevention programs currently going on in the federal government colleges and in many of the state schools, but we still need to cover a large percentage of these schools with the different prevention programs that are ongoing. And then there are many treatment facilities that have been upgraded to provide services, and the number of increased, and the different types of services also has expanded. So there are a number of things that are going on in the country. If you also think about it, within the past 5 years, we had the president set up an advisory committee to address the drug problem. So at the government level, there's an awareness. I think the governor's wife just concluded within 3 weeks ago a drug prevention, treatment and care sensitization training, just to make them more aware of the issues on ground and look for ways that they can address it in their different states. So there are various things that is ongoing in terms of raising awareness, and I can say that including the National Assembly, many things are currently happening in the country, but the problem is such that we need to all consciously put our efforts into addressing it.
Thank you so much, sir.
How can we effectively include gender-based violence issues related to substance use in our interventions and in school curriculum?
Well, I mean, you know, that's if I can answer it this way, it's an ongoing discussion. If you notice, even for Nigeria now, in many states, we're now having laws that have taken up a serious look at gender-based cases of violence that exist and come before the judiciary system. And each state is actually putting laws in place to address this. So there's a growing sensitivity or understanding of the fact that we need to actually take a cursory look at gender-based violence. And so being sensitive to this means mainstreaming it into everything we do, including just the education of young men and young women in terms of how to respond, how to interact, and how to prevent the occurrence of gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, sir. We've been talking to Dr. Akanidomo Ibanha from the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime on the impact of substance abuse on gender-based violence. Thank you, sir, for taking our time to be part of our show, the ICDB special on Kakaaki today. And thank you to our dear viewers for tuning in.
That's all we got for you today on the ICDB special on Kakaaki. We hope you will join us on other shows as we explore topics related to ending gender-based violence.
This program has been brought to you by Playback Nigeria and AIT. We look forward to having you and your children join us for our weekly improv acting classes in Abuja. If you want to learn how you can see theater impact in your life, how to perform, well, you can email us at office@playbacknigeria.com or call 090-7280-8091.
If you want to know how you can support or be part of our advocacy to end gender-based violence, you can check our work on our website at www.playbacknigeria.com.
Until we come your way on Thursday, my name is Tehila Zaman, and it has been a pleasure to host you with
Hannah Obashola. Over to the studio.